2017 workshop session. Let us stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. We'll begin with public comments on agenda items. If anyone has a comment on the agenda, please approach the podium, speak into the microphone, state your name and town that you're from, and address the Board of Education. Okay, great. Moving on to the superintendent's report. Mr. Brooks.
Good. Thank you very much, Ms. Horton. Welcome, everyone. Thank you very much for coming tonight. Before I get myself started, however, I do want to introduce a new person that is up here with us, all the way to my right, the viewer's left, and that is our new student Board of Education rep, Isabella Martinez. So, Isabella. The Board of Education did accept applications and interviewed candidates that did apply for it, and Isabella was chosen by the Board of Education. So, congratulations. Did you want to say a couple of things?
I just wanted to say thank you for giving me this opportunity. I'm very excited to work for it as an after board and excited to
Terrific. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you, Isabella. Welcome. We were very impressed not only with your resume, but with your presentation. So thank you for your time and your service.
So on that note, school is open. We're very excited to have the children back in our buildings. Really, the lifeblood of our business is back, and it's fantastic to see the children wandering through the hallways and hear the murmur of activity, and it's fantastic to have them back. So thank you very much, families, for giving them to us for the year, and we're going to do some great things this year. So very excited about it. A couple of prompts just for the board to think about tonight. There certainly are a couple of items on the old business or new business section of the agenda. I just want to kind of prompt the discussion as we're moving here. Board of Education vacancy is something that the board does need to figure out how they want to actually direct our district clerk to proceed on that. So I'm going to kind of duck out of that conversation if and when that conversation does come up, but Patrick is prepared to move that conversation forward if the board so chooses. I'm asking for some direction from the board on the meeting format. Specifically, which reports do you want and when? So for example, typically we have a student superintendent's report at every meeting, and then every other meeting there is if there's a report, an Ulster School Boards, an Orange Ulster School Boards, and a student rep report. Do you want those reports to be at the first meeting of the month or the second meeting of the month? And it really doesn't matter to me either way, and certainly do we want to keep with the same format that we have for students of the month? So trying to factor all that in on how the board wants to proceed with deciding on those pieces. So when do we want the reports, students of the month? Just a couple of other quick points before I ask you for answers there. Executive session time and meeting time. I know we had some general dialogue about the potential for having our regular meetings at 7 o'clock instead of 7:30, with an executive session potentially at 6 o'clock when needed. So maybe we could have a dialogue on that if that's something we want to do moving forward. And I also have a paper to help prompt the dialogue on the themes for the meetings with some ideas. So I'll pass that out as you're discussing those other items. If it's not now, then during new business. Thoughts, perspectives? You want to wait till we think about it a little bit?
Yeah, I think on the old business, we had the retreat, the meeting times and locations, but if
Okay, so
you
we can
want to...
wait till then. So, whatever you want to do. It's at the board's... I really don't have an awful lot else in my report. Certainly the board retreat date, it sounds like we're going to try for September 19th at about 6:30. Susan and I are working with NYSBA to try to make those arrangements and fine-tune a presenter for that. Putting out there that board goals, something that we are continuing to have some, or beginning to have some dialogue on. At the next board meeting, we're hoping to roll out a parallel meeting, meaning we'll use the paper agenda and we'll use the board doc format. So I'll propose that at the next meeting, we are going to be having a dialogue on our acceptable use policies, cell phone use, et cetera, but I'd also like to do a short 10-minute training. Mike Bakatsias is prepared for that, certainly as is Teresa, for anything that's needed to help the board get through the electronic side, so that maybe by the October meeting, we can be on just the board docs platform. Teresa did send out logins, so login should be there. It's pretty intuitive, but we want to give an opportunity for some training too. And then the last piece, if we could, if the board chooses, during new business, Pat and I would like to have a discussion regarding our reserve funding, specifically the capital reserve, and what we would like the board to support as far as a deposit into our capital reserve. So I kept the list, so I've got it.
Oh, okay, thanks.
But if we could go back at some point in time and address these things tonight, that'd be very good
Great.
for giving us direction on how to proceed.
Awesome.
And with that, I don't have anything else to report.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll move on to number 5, personnel recommendations. Resolved that the Board of Education, upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, approve the following personnel recommendations as presented. Can I get a motion to approve personnel recommendations? Joanne, second. John? Any discussion?
I do have one amendment. I'd ask for the certificated under G, Courtney Creasy, special education leave replacement. We got release date. We were hoping for it to be the 5th, but it's actually, the start date would be the 8th. So the start date would be 9/8/2017. MA Step 1, 56,977 pro rata. And Teresa will make that note in the official record that she's keeping over there. So it's not 9/2, it's not 9/5, it's 9/8.
And as far as the per diem rate for Mary Ann Wilson, is that the same as her prior pay when we had her?
It's a little bit more, but we're also not paying her for additional time beyond what she was doing then. She did some work on Saturdays, and that allowed a lower rate, but she's just going to be working straight her per diem days during the school year. Whenever she's in, that's the rate. Whenever she's not in, that's the rate. She doesn't get paid that.
I was just gonna say,
And
are there,
in regards to the adult ed, are we still operating in the black with that program?
Yes, as of the last time we looked at it, we were.
Do we have current enrollment, or is it too soon?
I don't have that information tonight.
Okay, I wasn't sure.
right,
And Cindy, who runs the program, knows that we need to operate in the black, so courses run or don't run based upon enrollments. And she's very in tune to that, so.
so I have a question, Mike, on creating and increasing the positions. Could you explain a little bit more on that one?
Yes, definitely not increasing, it's swapping for. Thank you very much for reminding me. The two positions that are being created under this, the teaching assistant, paraprofessionals unit, and the childhood 1-6, those are actually swapping out for current positions that we will not be filling. The teaching assistant position will be assigned at the elementary school in lieu of our library aide, and that will be a budget neutral swap, meaning there's no impact on the budget. It's dollar for dollar, basically the same. And then childhood 1-6 teacher instead of a librarian, that is the same. We had difficulty finding a certified quality librarian, so this is an alternative way for us to approach that fill by looking at a much larger pool of people, which is the childhood 1-6, and look for specific skills that would be focused around those that would be needed in a library, more specifically around it being a true media center with a computer background, with research, really looking forward to how we integrate all of those elements in our media center. So while it's creation of positions, not increase of positions, because the other two we're not going to fill.
So Mike, I got a question. The original two were a library,
A librarian.
media specialist, librarian.
Yeah, library media
and-
specialist, yeah.
And a library aide, right?
Correct, the library aide was a retirement,
Okay,
and the librarian was a new item in this budget.
okay. And both in MES? They were both,
No.
Okay.
The teaching assistant will be at MES, and the librarian is at the middle school.
okay. Okay, and that's the way what the original ones were as well?
Correct.
Okay,
I mean, that's where we're assigning them. The librarian actually is a K-12 assignment, and we assign them whichever building we want. But with this, the person would be in the tenure area of teacher 1-6, so they can be assigned to any grades 1 through 6. We're going to assign that person to the library.
okay. So you're giving yourself flexibility. I just was trying to remember if the original aide was in MES aide to the librarian, but no. The original position, the original aide that retired was also in the middle school, as they are going to be now.
Correct, the library aide was, no, the library aide that retired was at the elementary
MES.
school.
Okay, but the new one is going to be in the middle school.
No,
Okay.
we have a library aide that was at the elementary school that retired. We're going to replace that person with a teaching assistant and not fill the library aide. The librarian is a new position that we're going to be at, that's going to be at the middle school, and we're not going to fill the librarian slot. We're going to have a 1-6 teacher be assigned to the library.
The library aide was the resignation, correct?
Right, not a retirement, resignation, right.
Okay.
Did I get your question?
Yes.
Okay.
Any further discussion?
Yes. On the childhood 1-6 teacher.
Yes,
So I'm assuming by 1-6 we mean certificated for 1 through 6?
Correct.
elementary? Can that person actually teach library to all middle school kids?
yes, because the class is actually for 6th graders. 7th and 8th grade use the library as a resource. So teacher, 7th grade English teacher, 7th grade science teacher, 8th grade math teacher brings their children to the library. The 1-6 teacher and the classroom teacher work in concert. So the classes really are, the required classes are for 6th graders.
Okay, good, thank you.
I have a question, because James, you just brought up a good point. So wouldn't we do it the other way around, and instead of going 1 through 6, go 6 through 12?
No, because the certification's not 6 through 12, it's 7 through 12.
And they can't teach the 6th graders.
Correct. And really, we're going to get a much larger pool with this group. So this is where our best shot at getting high-quality people is going to come from this. And certainly, this is going to be a posting that'll go out. There may be somebody within our system that's interested with this, and then we end up hiring someone from the outside to fill that person. You know, maybe there's a 1st grade teacher, or a kindergarten, or a 6th grade teacher, who knows? But the posting will go out, we'll start a full search looking for the right person. We would have a problem if we went 7 through 12, because that person would not be able to teach the classes to the 6th graders.
So they're not teaching the 7th and 8th grade?
There's no real classes that are required for the 7th and 8th grade.
And Mike, just a reiteration, I think you answered before, but just so it's heard, this is budget neutral because a librarian and a teacher are on the same
Right, the
step
librarian is a
scales?
teacher, it's a library
Okay.
teacher, right.
And the teaching assistant was at the same scale as the person, the other position as well?
It's very close.
Yeah.
They're in different scales, but it's very close dollar for dollar.
Okay.
Teaching assistant is a newly created scale that we have, and the library aide is a different scale, but they're very similar.
Were they both in the paraprofessional
No,
definition?
no, the library aide is in the clerical secretarial unit, and the teaching assistant is in the paraprofessionals.
Okay.
Any further discussion?
And by doing the teaching assistant this way, we're also now bringing the 3 buildings into parity. So the model we have now is we have a librarian with teaching assistants, librarian with teaching assistants, librarian with teaching assistants. Certainly in the long run, if the opportunity does present itself, we, perhaps with retirements and things like that, we may be able to find a high-quality librarian. But having those teaching assistants in the library that also work with our computer system is such a great piece as far as pulling all of our systems together as one. So it really does round things out to be the right model for us instructionally. So thanks for the questions.
Anyone else? Okay, Joanne,
Yes.
Frank,
Yes.
James,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Russell?
Yes.
Myself, yes. Moving on to number 6, contracts. Resolved that the Board of Education, upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, authorize and approve the superintendent to sign the following agreements as presented. Can I get a motion to authorize and approve contracts? Frank, second James. Discussion?
Just a quick question to Pat. I think I've heard the answer to this before, but, sorry, I can't remember. Why do we have to do this every year? I know the transportation contract was multi-year, but we vote on, the board votes on this every year, right? Just
This is a cooperative transportation contract, so this is we have transportation contracts that are approved by the state for a 5-year basis, which we do not have to now approve every year. But this, every year, we have to reauthorize the contract with Orange Ulster BOCES, because on a year-to-year basis, the shares will change potentially. So what they do is they look at all of the component districts who are participating in this program. They'll look at, basically a singleton or 1 or 2 students going to some faraway place, and they'll look at surrounding districts that may also have another child going to that same placement, and then they'll combine the 2 of them.
So it's
a
not really-
requirement. Orange Ulster BOCES requires a contract be approved every year.
So this contract is with Orange County BOCES instead, not
Orange Ulster BOCES.
Orange Ulster BOCES, sorry, and not the transportation company.
Correct. This
Okay,
is
that's where I was confused. Thank
Right,
you.
it's a cost savings measure. It's where we can double up with other districts, significantly saving money because we're putting multiple district students onto one bus that are coming from the same general path to that Goshen site.
Generally, the overall cost of the run is higher than what our individual run would be done, but we split that with another district. So, we're probably paying less than 2/3 of what we would have normally paid.
Yeah, okay, I just didn't realize it was separate from the bus company. Thanks.
Any further discussion? All in favor to authorize and approve contracts, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion is carried. Number 7, textbook adoption. Resolved that the Board of Education, upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, authorize and approve the following textbooks as presented. Can I get a motion to authorize and approve textbook adoption? Joanne? James, second. Any discussion? All in favor of textbook adoption, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Say no. Motion is carried. Number 8, CSC, CPSE reports. Resolved that the Board of Education, upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, authorize the receipt of the CSE, CPSE recommendation of the meeting as presented. Can I get a motion to authorize the receipt of reports? Joanne, Frank, second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion is carried. Number 9, policy adoption. Resolved that the Board of Education, upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, approve the second reading and adopt the following policies as presented. Can I get a motion to approve and adopt policies? Frank, second. James, discussion?
Just a quick question. When I read through these, I noticed only one that had any markups on it in terms of color and looked like editing markups was number 7320. Were there changes in the other ones, or is it just because it's multiple readings, these are the final copies?
You have to do 2 reads publicly before the adoption,
Okay,
and then on the second read, you can do an adoption, so there is no change to this
okay.
from the first read.
And the one that does show markups, were there changes from the first read, or it's just looks the same way? Okay. Okay, got it.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Say no. Motion is carried. Number 10, cash advance. Resolve that the Board of Education, upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, authorize cash advances for any life skills class trip during the 2017-18 school year to be used in accordance with New York State GMS 77B and 77C for actual and necessary expenditures related to the trip. Can I get a motion to authorize the cash advance? Joanne, second. Frank, any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion is carried. Number 11, donations. Resolved that the Board of Education, upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, accept the donation of $1,203 from a group of athletic benefactors. Can I get a motion to accept the donation? James, second. Joanne? Any discussion?
Yes. Did they specify where the money would go, or we can't do that?
They didn't. I did meet with a representative from the group and had a discussion with our athletic director, and the funds will be used for a more robust and higher quality portable sound system to be used at our fields. We were going to try to figure out a way, matter of fact, we had the contractor come in to reduce or eliminate the echo factor from our scoreboard out at the turf field, but there really is no real fix for that. That's just the nature of the beast. So the group chose to help support a more robust portable PA system that can be used.
So will this cover the cost of the PA system?
Pretty close.
So
Yeah.
will
I mean, we might have to
be-
put a couple dollars in, but it would be out of the athletic budget.
Do you know how much it would be?
I don't offhand know. That's something that, once the donation's accepted, they'll work on making those purchase orders. But
And then,
they have the money in their budget to be able to support it.
and then you'll bring it back to us, because it would be nice to know how much, you know, because
Typically, I
they were kind
wouldn't
enough to, they were kind enough to donate the money,
Yep.
you know, so.
We'll make sure that we let them know. Well, I've met with them, so they're
Who
very,
is the group of athletic
they
benefactors?
prefer to be held anonymous.
Which
That's
is
why
fine,
it's.
right,
Yeah,
which is
that's
fine.
why, yep.
I just, it's very nice, and thank you.
Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. Motion is carried. Number 12, non-public school transportation. Resolved that the Board of Education, upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, approves the updated resident requests for transportation to non-public schools for the 2017-18 school year as presented. Can I get a motion to approve the transportation request? Frank, second. James? Any discussion?
Your question, Pat, there was an increase over what we previously approved?
Yes.
Was it people that failed to respond in time or new residents?
There are both a combination of new residents and some people who got admitted afterwards. By law, they have to give their request by April 1st to us. So if someone, and we've had a number of people who've come and requested transportation to non-public placements after the April 1st deadline, and we deny those requests unless we already have students going to that location, and then we're required by law, if there's no additional cost, to accept them. So the additions that you're seeing are additional students going to locations which we were already transporting students to.
And they fit within the confines of the
Yes.
the bus we planned on using?
Yes.
Or a car or whatever?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Did you say, is it an increase or a decrease from last year, do you know?
From last year, I would have to check, but it's an increase from what you had approved previously for the 17-18 school year.
It's close.
Actually, looking at the sheet, it does show that it looks like it's about a 3-student decrease from where we were
3 student, you said?
for last year, yeah. It's a 4-student increase from what you previously approved, but overall a 3-student decrease from the number we were transporting last year.
Well, the best part is less places we're going.
Correct, that saves us money.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion is carried. Number 13, assessment. Resolved that the Board of Education, upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, acknowledges the receipt of the School District Assessment Roll Verification Form, Assessment Roll Year 2015, submitted to the New York State Education Department as presented. Can I get a motion to acknowledge the assessment roll? Frank, second. James, discussion?
Hey, question, Patrick. The form shows preliminary and adjusted. What was the difference between the two? When did the two happen?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear your last part there.
Just trying to understand what preliminary, when was that done? How was it adjusted? And
So the preliminary numbers are the numbers where the tax rolls were set for the 15-16 school year as of April 1st, 2015. What happens is subsequent to the setting of the tax rolls, there's various small claims assessment reviews that take place. So anytime there's a court determination that would reduce an assessment, we then go back and report that to State Education Department because they use these figures to base our state aid calculation on. So they've received the information that existed as of April 1st, 2015. They don't necessarily have the adjusted numbers, so we supply the adjusted numbers with the backup documentation from the courts so they can use the accurate valuations of the individual municipalities so when they determine the state aid allocations throughout the state.
so this ties to the tax levy adjustments that we saw last meeting, right, where it went down?
It
Or
doesn't
how-
tie
or
to it, it's the
that-
same concept, right?
When you
It's
say
the
that-
it's
when
the
you-
valuation,
Yeah,
what you
okay.
saw was the valuation for the 17-18 school year. Eventually, 2 years out from now, we'll be doing this for that school year.
Okay.
Any of the small claim assessments that come in throughout this year.
I should have said that different. It ties
Sure.
to the report that you showed us
Correct.
last week
Yeah,
in terms
same
of the
basic,
overall
right,
reduction
overall
of
district
assessment.
valuations.
Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion is carried. Number 14, old business. If we can, I'd like to start at the Board of Education retreat. As Mr. Brooks said, we are looking at September 19th. Have we been
It's not
able?
secured yet. It should be okay. When I spoke with her last, she said they work around us. So when we can identify a date and time when the board can gather, they'll find someone for that. So it should be fine, I just haven't gotten a confirmation. I have the
And the-
information also for you, because she just want to talk to you.
Right, and they are available to work around that time frame.
It should be, yeah, shouldn't be a problem. If there is, hopefully we'll hear by tomorrow and we can,
Okay.
See which one-
Everyone good with September 19th at 6:30, so we can confirm that with NISBA?
I am, yes.
And it's gonna be here?
That was
Think
going
so,
to be our
right?
next,
might as
have
well.
it upstairs?
Might as well,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. And that will be a board retreat to discuss internal operations and efficiencies.
That works for me, Sue?
Russell, does that work for you?
I'll be cruising in right at that time.
Okay. So we've got, I think, Joanne, that was good for you
Yes,
as well?
the 19th is fine. Thank you.
All right. Moving on to the Board of Education meeting times and locations. So, as we discussed a little bit, I think we want to try to make our workshop meetings more of a workshop meeting. So, in regards to those meetings, instead of us all sitting here in a line, is anyone opposed to us having them in a different room? Of course, open to the public, but in a different place where we can sit and not really be looking at each other like this. And it can be more of an opportunity to have true discussion.
I like the idea of like we talked about, doing it at a table. The only problem with doing them elsewhere is the quality of our production to the public isn't as good. So, I mean, obviously, we could move a couple rows of seats because there's plenty of room here, And if we use those tables down in front, we sat around them in a big circle, you know, I think we got all the PA stuff is here, and we would then at least have the benefit of the video. You know, I know we go on the road usually 3 times a year already, and those
On the road.
aren't as, the quality's not the same.
Yeah. That's true.
You referring to the sound quality, Frank, or you mean just the interaction?
The
and-
sound in the video,
Okay.
for those people that don't come to the meetings.
Oh, okay.
For the 4.3 million views that we have.
I can definitely attest to that. I've watched some of them, and it is harder, a lot more echoing and so forth.
I guess we know who our one viewer was.
Okay, so then getting back to the meeting times,
Same thing.
is anyone opposed to starting a bit earlier and having executive session beforehand? If we,
Yes.
you're opposed to it?
I have a position at work now that requires me to attend meetings. I attend those right before this meeting. I leave there and I come directly here, so I leave my house at 5:30 to go to another meetings, and then I come directly here. So anything earlier than what we do now is not going to work for me.
So what if we had them start, so 7 is not good. 7:30 is,
7:30 is pretty much like, I left there today at 7:15 and reached here, and it's in Poughkeepsie, so it's,
okay,
that 15 minutes is what I had to get here. Now, those meetings don't always last an hour, but I can't be sure that I'm ever gonna be out early.
right. So then to say that we have a meeting later than 7:30, if we started with executive session at 7:30 and then put a meeting out to the public for perhaps a workshop meeting? No, because then
too
our
late for
workshop
public.
meetings, we have student of the month.
Then
Which would
So-
put those, but student a month later.
Yeah,
which
and we
would-
can't do that to the students.
Plus,
So-
if you followed the blog, like last night, the Poughkeepsie Journal's blog, the city of Poughkeepsie did their executive session beforehand, and you can just see the anxiousness of the public, because if you don't start, if you're into an executive session thing, you don't start when you say you're gonna start, it's just not fair to whoever did come
So
out.
why don't we just leave it the way we have it for now, and we can bring it back maybe at a later date? We can discuss it.
Or
I
we
mean,
try
you know.
and really rein in, I think with the things you've talked about, with trying to do more of a consensus agenda, so that we can actually move into discussions of anything that we have to do publicly, quicker. You know, I think doing that, because there's no reason most of what we do can't be part of, like we do with the personnel, do a consensus agenda approval, and if there's anything on there ahead of time, when we start doing board docs, that we could request be put as a separate, I think it would take all of us to make sure everybody's reading everything ahead of time, and making, if there's something that has to be separated, we do it ahead of time, so it's a separate vote item before the agenda's published, so that we can come in, do the consent agenda, and then only have to have broad discussion about the items that anybody has a concern about. The routine stuff, I think the meetings will go quicker,
Yeah.
which should get us into exec and get us out of here before midnight.
Yeah.
I'm certainly not opposed to, say, some sort of time frame to work within, so that we can end meetings earlier and get to where we gotta be. I mean, let's face it, we all have families, we don't wanna get home at midnight. I know they certainly don't, so it's,
I think a part of the discussion about it was because, you know, we're all coming from various backgrounds and, you know, the school system, although we're doing so much work behind the scenes, you know, you're transitioning from one profession into another hat. And sometimes, you know, it takes a little while for your brain to transition into that and to, you know, really be on your mark in order to serve the capacity to the best of our ability. So it was kind of a, you know, a way to have that transitioning process. So then we get out here and we have even more fruitful discussion in, you know, public session. So if we can't do it, we can't do it. But I like the idea of bulking items, for lack of better terms, when we can, so we can be more expedient in the agenda.
When we were setting up board docs, the person that came to help us set it up looked at our agenda and said, how come you have multiple items, multiple motions for your consent agenda? So it's kind of leading right into that discussion that we're having here, where for at least the financials, personnel, CSE, and contracts, or at least personnel, financials, and CSE, we could do one motion for those. And any items that any one of you says, can you separate that out, wouldn't be affected by that consent agenda, and it would be smooth at the meeting. It would just put that item, whatever it is, as a separate item under new business or something, some other items or something.
Right.
And then other things that are onesies and twosies that aren't your typical things that come up at every meeting would be a separate item. And we could easily do that.
I like that idea.
But, okay, so if one of us says, okay, we want to separate it out, we would separate it out, or do we have to have the whole?
If you
Go to the
notify me
board.
give me a little bit of time, but if you notify me prior to the meeting, you know, through when I send out the agenda in draft, typically on the Friday, and then by Monday afternoon, we're trying to publish that out publicly. So between that Friday and that Monday publishing time, if there's an item that you want separated, it's very simple for us to just cut and paste it. I mean, that's simple. If it's the day of the meeting, we absolutely can do it. It may be something that the board wants to consider doing at the meeting if it's that way then, because I'm just concerned about having a published agenda that's not reflective in accuracy of what we're actually going to be conducting business on.
Right.
Although we can. I mean, it's very simple to make a change. Because right now, when we make a change on the agenda, I'm trying to make it simple for our system too. We have to make it in 4 different locations. So when we have the board docs fully running, it's changed in one place and it's live for everybody. So the change is going to be much simpler going down the road. It's just the sooner we can get the notice of, hey, can you make this change, the easier it is for us to make sure the public is aware of a change, especially if it's big. Small stuff is not.
Well, and obviously, if there's a concern, then everybody knows about it, and we're gonna have a fruitful discussion one way or the other, but we won't go into this whole having to amend the agenda
Yeah.
and go back and forth. and
Correct.
Waste time just doing a procedural thing that has to be done once we've published an agenda.
Correct. So what elements do you want in a consent agenda? I think I hear personnel, financials, and CSE are easily in there. Are contracts part of that or no?
No.
90% of our contracts are standard routine. You know, if you had a chance to look at the new documents, the document is attached right by the motion. So if you review them ahead of time and there's nothing outstanding and it doesn't have to be removed, because there's so many things that legally we have to approve, but we don't need to vote on every one.
I mean, if there's
Unless
something,
somebody else thinks otherwise.
if there's something that's a question, we can certainly separate
pull
a
it out.
contract.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, with the new docs, the viewing public can see them, they can see what we see.
They see everything you can see except that has to remain confidential. So there are layers there. So, yes,
And only once it's published.
correct.
So that if we're voting on things, well, my point is, if we're voting on things in a block, they're seeing basically what we're seeing rather than personal type
Correct.
things that we have to go on.
Correct.
So we can easily vote on a block. They know what we're voting on. They can view it just
Correct.
as easily as we can.
Correct.
Yeah,
The
the
document is
upside-
associated right there with the
They
item.
can bring it up and see exactly what we're doing.
And the big benefit compared to what we do now is, once we're using board docs, is we see them ahead of time. Once it's published to the public, they don't have to go in and upload those as separate documents after the fact. They're automatically uploaded
They're already there.
and searchable and
Correct.
viewable.
And you can still ask questions for any item.
Right, but that in itself, not voting on all these separate items is gonna save a ton of time just on its own.
Any way to streamline this is,
a huge advantage, in my opinion. It's a smart decision.
And this isn't a one-time only thing too, by the way. We can continue to refine as we progress through the year. I'm sorry, Joanne, but that we can always make adjustments. It's not a
So,
once and done.
my question, if someone comes to the meeting and they don't have the computer or been on the computer, are we still doing paper for when somebody walks in?
We'll probably have just the skeleton,
agenda.
but we also are working on hopefully having it running live on the screen too. So that's something that is going to be a work in progress for us as before you see Teresa's been building the agendas now in board docs. We're just not live with it. So the next meeting's going to be a trial for us too. That's why we're going to run electronic and paper side by side, so that in case there's a problem.
Because my concern also is if somebody does come from the public, they can pick it up and say, oh,
Correct.
that's what they're talking
Yeah.
about.
Yeah.
It's-
But right now, you don't have any of the attachments.
Right, it's basically the same thing that we have. It's a lot shorter in paper, it's only, depending upon the size of the agenda, it's only going to be a page and a half.
and I will get the other.
Okay. So we'll work on formatting that for the 28th.
Sounds good.
Now, with the board docs, the one thing, because this area isn't on the district Wi-Fi, correct?
Yes, we put it in.
Oh, I'm like,
It was last time. I'm on,
I'm not.
or maybe I'm in courtroom.
You're on, you got the courtroom one. That's
We have to
When I
work on it.
switched phones, I lost the courtroom one. That's why I know we don't have it.
We'll have it in place for the next
Yeah.
Okay. And then,
But that's the next question. Do we supply you with devices? Do you want to bring your own devices? How do we want to work on this?
Everyone has a Chromebook.
Some of us don't.
Oh, right.
I gave mine back.
I gave mine back.
We have them on site, so if you want, we can issue you one tonight. So whatever you need, we've got one for
As
each
much
of
as I'd like
you.
to see that in the classroom, I kind of need one now, I guess, if we're going this route.
How about we do this? If you need a device, if you could send Teresa and I an email, we'll make sure we have one for you. If you want to bring your own device, it's fine. It doesn't matter to us, however you want it.
we'll have you do the Wi-Fi thing.
Correct. We just have to get everybody set up in that first to make sure everybody's on live. That'll be part of the training and setup.
So the next meeting, we are going to have a little presentation on that.
Correct. We'll do a little training on getting everybody set up and run. It'll be a little workshop-y.
So,
So-
workshoppy. So everybody has to bring a device, their device, the device that we get here, either or, to
Yeah,
next
either bring
meeting.
your device or let us know that we need to get you a device.
Okay.
And then the other thing with them is can we, and I know it's a work in progress, but can we make sure that on our tab on the website, we have board docs as a hyperlink like we have e-docs now?
It's not there on purpose right now, but it will be. And the e-doc stuff will kind of go away.
I would just ask that you make sure whatever device you are bringing, that you have logged on to the board docs prior to getting here. It's just so we don't have any account issues and you know that you're connecting with your device. And then we'll, I think we'll plan a simulation vote, because that's where it gets a little different. I mean, it's pretty straightforward when you're looking at the items, but if we're going to automate the vote process, we might want to go through a few examples of that.
And there's a couple ways we can grow into that too, as I understand it. We can certainly have each of you vote from your device with a click, or Teresa can log your vote until we get used to it too. She can also fix and change your vote, if I understand correctly, right? If somebody oh, wait a minute, that wasn't what I meant to click, you can fix that, right? Yeah. Okay. Teresa's going to be busy.
Okay, so what are the other items? I have the,
Board themes.
okay, I have the goals, et cetera. Wasn't there something else, though?
Yeah,
That was
board meeting
pertaining-
themes. So I have a document with locations and themes for the meetings that I'll pass out. It just gets us set so we can be prepared for the meetings, especially if they're going to be a workshop-type format. Oh, she passed one down to Teresa, too,
Thank you.
So obviously, today's the 7th, and we're here. The 28th, we're prepared right now for a meeting here, focusing on the acceptable use policy review with principals Robin and Mike, and also a training for board member on board docs, or for board on board docs, 15 minutes or so. Especially if you're able to log in ahead of time, it makes it nice and simple. No, those go down there. I don't know if there's enough copies. Did you get those to the rest of the admins down there?
Oh, sorry.
There may or may not be a copy for them. Then, going on our roadshow, I'm proposing the 5th of October, the 2nd of November, and the 7th of December for us to start the elementary, go to the middle and the high school. And again, this would be similar to what we did last year with an academic review of our program, kind of the state of the school approach, looking at where we were, where we're going, plans for the future. And the principals are begging me, can we also do some showcasing of some fantastic things that are going on in the program? Because I asked them last year, I don't want to show, I would like to have principals showing a command for what's going on in their school from a statistics perspective. So I would be open to showcasing some things too, if the board is open to that. Certainly by the time we get into the December mode, I would ask the board to start thinking about budget parameters. As we're in December, administratively, we're beginning to form our budget. So if there are specific areas that you would like us to focus in on, that would be the time frame so that we can be prepared for when we get into the midwinter. We can present a budget that we're focused on the right things. Mid-January is the right time for us to look at our fiscal plan. Pat has done that the last few years and really looks at a 5-year perspective of where we are financially. And quite honestly, when we get into mid-February, the rest of the year is focused primarily on budget, although we have one more data review with the school report card that comes out in the middle to the latter part of spring.
I mean, I like the showcase idea, but I think it's important that it follow the presentation, because the showcase brings people, families, and I know we want to let them go sometimes, but I think it's important that once you have that captive audience, that whatever the building's going to present gets presented to everybody. Because otherwise, you're going to have this great showcase, and we're going to have this captive audience, and as soon as we get into the nuts and bolts, they're all going to get up and leave. And it's just going to be us. So I think if you do the showcase, you do the showcase at the end of the presentation so that they're all there for it. And everybody benefits, I think.
Okay.
It goes to John's idea of trying to get people to come to the meetings.
No, I totally agree.
Yeah, I agree with that too.
Now, I put it as the first meeting of the month. It doesn't have to be the first meeting if we're going to use the workshop versus regular meeting format. And again, it goes kind of into when are the reports going to be, when are the students of the month going to be. That's where the blanks are too. So I'm really flexible, doesn't matter to me.
So should we flip-flop them?
Well, I'm kind of okay with it, because what better thing to have at a workshop than knowing what right, that's what the workshop is, so I kind of like it the way it is.
Plus, that's 3 locations where we're doing the workshops, where it's easier to set up. You won't be, it'll be like the the more U-shaped or V-shaped
Yeah, that's true.
at those other locations, and, you know, it's a little less moving around for here, too.
And we're still doing the student of the month in the first meeting, right?
Yes.
You want that in the first meeting or the
Well,
second?
is it that, I asked that because
Well-
that becomes a pretty loaded agenda, right? Although it makes for even greater captive audience potentially, but,
Yeah, you do the student of the month, you do the presentation, and then the showcase, and then at our next meeting, we try and hold our execs for the next meeting. We do the business we have to do, and then hopefully we're getting through it quicker, and then we could actually get in, because we really were successful last year with only trying to do one exec most months, one a month.
So, I mean, is everyone going to be up for that, though? Doing a student of the month, a showcase,
Seems a bit,
and and then truly a workshop discussion.
Well, the workshop, we do at the second meeting
Not a workshop.
first.
The first meeting.
You know, maybe if
That's a lot.
if the showcases are gonna bring families out, maybe the second meeting, having the Students of the Month brings families out to that.
Yeah, I think.
I like that idea.
Changing the
Yeah.
the student of the month to the second meeting would be better. And it's gonna be more effective with time, I think.
And
like
hopefully
that.
the presentations that the schools are doing will drive our workshop
Correct.
for those specific months.
Yeah. Good.
So we just agreed that we do student of the month in the second meeting?
Yes.
Yeah, I think that would be a better allocation of time across the two meetings, for sure. Because if we do this right, as you all were discussing, we all were discussing about making it more efficient and consolidating the agenda, we should see the results of that pretty quick.
Yeah, I agree.
Like, could be next meeting, was assuming we get the right reports and everything consolidated the right way.
You know, the report's going to be in the regular meeting as well?
I'm going to ask for the Orange Ulster School Board meeting to be done on the first meeting of the month, because it's Wednesday night, and then our meeting is Thursday night, and it makes it easier to come instead of waiting 3 weeks to present that information
Oh, you're the
So-
first Wednesday?
on the first Wednesday of every month, and then, like tonight, I went last night.
It's usually, the reports are, it's not like they need 15 minutes apiece to. it's
No,
usually
they're
pretty
like very
quick.
quick, it's just to go like an overall of
Yeah.
what happened there, it's a very quick 1, 2, 3.
And Ulster's only has 5 meetings a year. So it's not, we don't have nearly as many meetings. And actually, one of them is the annual, it's the dinner thing. So there's really only 4 meetings a year. So it's not, it's not, and wherever it falls, I don't even think it needs, it could be under old business. I don't, you know, it doesn't even need to be a placeholder. If we have something specific, we could bring it up as old business for our, just to bring up everybody where we're at with our meetings. You know, the committees can report if there's any old business.
What about Isabella's report?
Well, let's see. She probably should wait till the end of the month. So, I'm just saying, so you can tell us what happened throughout the whole
That
month.
actually is a good idea, I like that.
Sure.
Which would be the same night as student of the month.
The second, yeah, the second Thursday.
Do
Either way, it's a month.
Right.
Do you have a
Teresa.
preference,
Third
Isabel?
Thursday.
Yeah, Teresa, could you get her a schedule of the meetings too, when you get a chance? Thanks.
I'm curious to hear what Isabella's preference is on that. Does it matter to you, first meeting or second meeting of the month?
Great. So before we get into discussion on goals, et cetera,
Can I just make sure I have this right?
yes,
So the workshop meeting will be the first meeting of the month. We'll have presentations and the Orange Ulster, Ulster BOCES reports when needed at that meeting. The second meeting will be a regular meeting that'll be formatted similar to this as far as seating goes, Students of the Month and Student Rep Report. And we're going to try for the workshop meetings to set ourselves in a true workshop format depending upon where we are. Here, we're going to set up down here,
Yep.
and the buildings will set up in some kind of a square, rectangular, sit around the table
yes,
experience for the workshop meetings, right?
yes,
Okay. Consider it done.
great. So like I said, before we move on to our goals discussion, in regards to filling the vacant Board of Education seat, do you have a,
Pat passed out
Request.
a document there.
oh,
There's 2 documents.
I have it too, is what you're saying? Oh, I do.
Yeah.
Okay.
One is the memo from our attorney regarding the process, the second one. And the top one is a potential draft advertisement that could be used. And so Pat, I give it to you.
Yeah, so if you're, if you want to take a look and review that and you know, we could authorize the release of it at any time. If you want to take some time, review it, give me information. You know, if it's good to go as it is now, we could do it now. You don't really have to approve
I think
anything.
we saw a draft of it. Does anyone have any
Yeah,
comments?
I wasn't here for the last meeting, so I'm curious of what direction we decided to go in. Are we,
So we have 3 options. We can hold a special election. We can, as a board, appoint someone to fill the seat, or the seat can remain vacant until May. Correct. If we choose to appoint, that person serves the seat until May.
and then 3 would go up for re-election?
Right. And
Or
then
3
they
vacancies.
serve in the period of, what? The period,
The two highest vote getters would get the
Right.
Three-year
full
terms.
3-year terms, and then the lowest vote getter,
Well, the third
the
highest.
third highest would get the one-year
remaining.
term.
Remaining.
So, yeah, so then the third lowest vote would get the remainder of
highest.
Bill's vacated term, correct?
yes.
Okay. Was there a consensus on what you guys wanted to do?
This is the first night to discuss.
This is
Oh,
what
okay,
was
so
said.
it
So-
wasn't discussed. I thought maybe it was-
I think that we felt pretty, from the very brief discussion that we had, I think we feel pretty strongly that we will not spend the money to have a special election.
Yeah, I'm pretty, you know, I don't like to spend the money.
You know, also, when we first discussed this, or maybe it was the first time we brought it up in executive session, I thought we only had 2 options, that there wasn't an option to leave it open. And we do.
There actually is an option
There is.
to leave.
Which
Yes,
is a
it
little
wasn't,
different in our conversation than we had before, too.
yeah. So basically, if we want to appoint, we have to put out to the public that we have a request for interest. So basically, this piece of paper in front of you is that's what would be going out to the public. And then we have to decide, once we get an enormous response, to fill this position,
I'm sure it will be hundreds.
Somebody told me today he was interested.
that at that point, we will invite them to come and speak, like each one of us has done when we have run, if everyone feels that's the direction we should go in. And from there, we have an opportunity to ask that candidate, if you will, questions. We can go into executive session to have specific discussion, but in order for us to appoint someone, that vote has to be in public, and all of us have to approve unanimously.
Right, so it has to be unanimous, or it just has to be majority?
I thought it had to be unanimous.
I think it's,
I think it did,
Yeah, that's what
if
we
I'm
were
not
saying.
mistaken. Did it not?
It doesn't say
No,
any
all
guidance.
board members must be present, but it's a majority vote
Okay.
of those that, so if you are down 1 member, you wouldn't be able to vote that night for the representative.
Well, technically, we're always down there, how's that work?
no, we're not down a member, because
I
we
thought
only
at
have
one,
6
I thought
members.
at one point they said unanimous.
Okay, so then, the question I would have is, let's say we put this
Yep.
posting out, and we get 100 people to say they want to do it, and we can't decide on any.
And we leave it vacant.
It can remain vacant.
Yes.
It can remain vacant. It's not recommended that it remain vacant because there could be a petition to the commissioner to force an election at that point. But what you could do is if you were to, you get to design your own process. So if you were to post and you were to come with a number of, you know, too many applicants or not enough applicants or not enough applicants that you feel meet the criteria of what you're looking for, you could then repost the position. So maybe if you get 100 applicants, you want to look for some specific criteria that you're interested in, which would limit that, you know, reduce those number of applicants.
I don't think we have to worry about the 100.
Right. But the point being that how you decide the process is completely at your discretion.
Okay.
Well, we have, obviously, we got our regular meeting coming up, then the 5th, we're talking about being at MES. What if we, as a suggestion, if we posted through close of business on the 19th, then we would see, of October, then we would see the actual, how many people we got, where we were gonna go, and then we could decide at that meeting on October 19th, what the next step should be. Then we'd actually have a feel for where we're at.
Yeah.
And it gives plenty of time to advertise, for people to respond, and they know they have till whatever time on the 19th to send in a letter of intent or whatever it says here.
Interest
A letter of interest to pass. I mean, sound like a plan?
Yes.
So is everyone in the consensus that we are going to appoint someone?
I am, yes.
Because I'm kind of leaning towards going with that one till the regular election comes up in May. I
The
know
only-
it's not recommended for the potential of
Well,
the
it's not
petition.
recommended because we could be forced into an election, which would be very costly.
Well, I mean, let's just look at the facts with that. I mean, at that point, there would be one of two recommendations, that we hold a special election, or we appoint someone. I don't believe that there would be any other ruling other than those two things, if I'm understanding it correctly. So I don't think we need to worry so much about that. I think that, we need to just be diligent about putting it out to the public, seeing who we can get, and, just doing the work that needs to be done to get the person to fill the seat. And if it, if we do the work and it happens, then that's a benefit to the board. If we do the work and it doesn't happen, then, we have that opportunity.
And it can't be held against us with the Commissioner of Education that we didn't attempt the process.
Correct.
Correct, and
And there's no, and this process isn't costing us anything.
And in reality, by the time you run through a first search,
Right,
and if it doesn't come to
it's gonna be
fruition,
May.
by the time
Yeah.
an appeal was made to the commissioner and a commissioner to decide on the appeal, the election would have probably already been here and passed.
Yeah.
Well, then, if we're going to do that, we're going to have to be, I think, very specific about the process we design, as Pat said, because I'm concerned that we get candidates and then we want to try to change direction, and it looks like we're maybe handpicking or just changing.
But
our
it is at
direction.
the discretion of the
No,
board.
I understand, and I'm just,
So basically, we are.
Yeah, you
we
are
are, but
handpicking.
if we could very publish our criteria and our process, everything.
We can't.
You can't.
Your criteria is what's listed there, because if they meet those criteria, they
They're
can
eligible.
serve on the Board of Education. We can't develop other criteria beyond what the law says the criteria is to serve on the board.
Okay, and I wasn't just thinking about the individual, but thinking about, like, do we have, we use terms as we were talking, do we have enough candidates, or do we have too many candidates? We should set those parameters as well. Let's not call them criteria, but parameters, whatever. Because if we get one person and we say it's not enough, we don't want to do it, I'm not sure that's going to go across.
I don't think that at that point, I mean, if we give that amount of time, if it's one person, it's one person. It's our discretion at that point.
That's correct.
And if you really only have one person that's interested, maybe they really are, I mean, that means there's nobody else out there. We know what it's like to go right to the end and maybe have a vacant seat just because we had nobody run. Right, John?
Yep. Well, again.
James
we
and I
wanna
had a
run it.
different
I just
story.
think we should
I think
have our.
Russell too.
Sorry, I didn't mean to talk over you.
Sorry, no.
I just would hate to see the perception, if we went to one person and somehow we decided that the person met the criteria, but we wanted more candidates, and we said, no, we're not going to do this, it's our discretion. It just could imply, wrong message.
Either way, it's going to imply it, because we have to pick the person or
Yeah, well,
not,
but
and
all
I,
I'm
listen,
saying
I
is
understand exactly.
Set it.
I
Set it,
understand
whatever
what
it
you're
is.
saying.
If we say, this is the criteria, if we get from 1 to X number of candidates, we'll run the process as designed, and any variations we do are, so, fine, all I'm saying is we decide it and say it up front, whatever it is, I don't care what it is, what we decide, set it and stick with it. I don't like the way it's worded, where you see what you get for candidates, and then at your discretion, you make a choice. That's where I think it opens up too much discretion, and we have.
But it's, you know, and listen, I certainly understand exactly what you're saying, but it's very clear in the education law what our options are. If the board chooses to fill the vacancy by appointment, it can establish its own procedure for filling the vacancy.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think, and sorry, John, correct me if I'm wrong. John wants to ensure, basically, that we just don't get one candidate and we have to choose or deny one candidate. He wants to see at least a pool of, say, 3.
I'm saying, not really, I'm saying, as that's written, we set it ahead of time, whatever it may be, that we say we need a minimum of 1 or we need a minimum of 2, whatever we set, we state it up front, and we stick with it. I don't want to get to the end of the process of people coming forward and then we change it at our discretion, which we're perfectly legal to do. That's what I'm saying. So follow that to the letter, pick whatever it is parameters we're going to choose, 1 to 4 candidates or 1 to unlimited number of candidates, whatever, and stick with it, and no changing. Once we get 1 candidate or whatever our minimum is, we go through the process and vote.
Oh, so you're suggesting that if we set a October 19th and we only get 1, that we could possibly say, oh, we'll push it out?
If we
I think-
decide to do that, but whatever, that's the kind of decisions I want to say we make ahead of time and publish and stick with, whatever it may be. We
Oh,
haven't-
okay, I understand what you're saying now. I mean,
Yeah,
making a time frame is perfectly,
making a time frame, minimum candidates, they have to meet these criteria that's set already, and anything else we think of that needs to be in the process, we state, we agree, we publish and stick with it. That's my only point. The way it's written, it gives you too much leeway.
You do have 2 meetings between now and the 19th to come up with those parameters,
Yeah.
too. So I don't know that you necessarily have to do it today. You could have some time to think about it.
Even better, right? I don't want to start that conversation tonight. That's how it'd be. We need
okay,
some time to
so
think
we
about
don't want to
that, I think.
finalize this until we have some time to think about it. Is that what you're suggesting?
Well, I think, do you want to put the posting out, and then you can determine the criteria while the posting is
I
live?
think we should wait.
Well, if
Or do you
I
wanna
think we should
do it
probably all
late?
decide, have some time to think, and then at that point, put it out. Because if we
Okay.
put it out and
Right.
then we come back with a different, everybody has a different feeling, then we're going to get into a scenario that John is talking about that we want to avoid for sure.
So we could plan
If
then.
everyone's in the agreement right now that we're going to go down the process of appointing someone, which I think we are.
No,
No.
that's not what we said.
I'm sorry,
No.
going to advertising, doing the vote, I'm sorry.
I'm not committed until we know who the pool of candidates are, whether or not it's in the best interest of the district to appoint somebody. And I'm against restricting our ability to make that decision until we see what, the law allows us the latitude. I'm not in favor of hamstringing ourselves by a decision because we're concerned about how it'll be perceived. The law is clear and it allows us to do something. I think we have, because the reality of it is, John, if we as a board knew today that Ralph was interested and we wanted to appoint Ralph, we could tonight appoint Ralph to the Board of Education legally, without ever posting, without ever doing anything. We're saying we're gonna post and see what the interest is in the community, and then, based on that, come up with a decision as a board. I think that's safer and better for the protection of the district than trying to appear like we're coming up with a fair and equitable process for everybody, when that's not what the law is. The law is broad for a reason, to allow us to take our knowledge of what we need in a person and see if it's really in the best interest of the district.
Okay, so you essentially disagree with what I said.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Fair enough, I just,
yeah,
okay, fair enough.
I didn't want to just say no, I just
No,
want to
no, no.
explain. I've been reading all these nice things they're giving us, I'm
I
trying to be nice.
appreciate the explanation. No?
And it brings up valid points.
Yeah.
Why paint yourself into a corner if you don't have to?
Does that make sense for everyone? What direction we're headed?
I could live with that.
So from now until the next meeting, we're going to take some time to consider. At the next meeting, we will decide how we're going forward.
I guess.
Yeah, I'm kind of okay with throwing this out there now and posting it. Let's see, if we're talking about doing this by the 19th, we need to get the advertising out to get interested parties in.
No, I'm confused.
I'm willing to do whatever the majority of the board wants to do. That was the last direction that I thought I
There's only three of
understood.
us speaking, so I'm wondering what the rest of the board wants to do.
Well, I'll make a
Russell,
motion.
what is your thought, Russell?
I don't have a thought right now on it.
I'd like to make a motion. I make a motion that the clerk publish the draft notice with a closing date of October the 19th at the close of business, so that the clerk can provide us with a pool of candidates, if anybody applies, and at that time, we can determine where to go from there.
Second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion on that?
So you're only talking about posting this? You're
Yes.
not talking about posting anything that describes the law that gives us the discretion that we just talked about, correct?
Correct. All in favor? Say aye.
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 Any opposed?
I'm opposed,
You're opposed?
yeah. I'd like to have more detail that goes with the posting, but to kind of describe the law that goes with it and
So,
how it works.
You want to amend it to add the copy of education law?
Yes, if that's how you would do it the right way, yes.
No, the right
But-
way is the way the board selects. So I just want to make sure
Yeah.
we're clear here.
Okay,
Well,
so,
let me say it differently. That's the right way to properly describe the law in its best, instead of a summary or, something that could potentially change the meaning. with
Rather
the
than law, why don't we just put the policy out? The board policy basically is the law. There's a board policy on this. So we can attach the board policy to the posting.
Even better,
Yeah, that makes.
even better.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
fine.
that's what I'd like to
Do we
see.
have to amend it?
So it's very clear with the posting,
With what the process is, absolutely, you know, without a doubt.
that's already
The
in place.
policy is in line with law. It's a simple thing to add that policy to the posting.
Your
Then
vote,
if we
your
can
vote
amend that-
already
if we-
passed, so you'd want to,
so we voted.
So can, I'd like,
you're going to have to rescind, you're going to have to rescind that vote and
I
then
make
make
a
a new
motion that we
motion.
rescind the vote we just took.
I second it.
I'd like to
Any
make,
discussion?
I'd like to make a motion to,
You got to vote on the rescind.
oh, sorry. Vote on the rescind, sorry. No discussion,
Motion and second.
no discussion.
Okay, no Joanne,
Yes.
Frank,
Yes.
James,
Yes.
John,
Yes,
Russell. Myself, yes.
Now you can, John.
okay. I'd like to make a motion to post this as written, post this letter as written.
No,
Sorry.
that's not our policy.
No.
Sorry.
This is a
Sorry,
this is
sorry,
an attorney
sorry.
letter.
This posting as written, which, an addendum, which would include our board policy describing the policy and representative of the law.
Until the close of business on October 19th.
Yes. What he
All
said.
in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion is carried. We made a decision. I'm actually afraid to bring up goals at this point.
Why? We're on a
No,
roll.
no, I'm just saying.
I have
We-
last year's copy.
Yeah, so do I, so do I.
In case
All
anybody
right.
needs a copy, I have extra.
Okay. No, this is good. I'm old. I'm joking. So, in regards to, because we're still on old business. We're still on old business.
We're going back.
Okay, so, old business, Board of Education goals for 2017-18. So, in front of you, you have our goals for 2016-17, what we currently have. I think moving forward, if I may suggest, what we need to create is a vision. And that vision is to see beyond the present and look toward the future and create something that surpasses expectations. I mean, a vision is not what we're doing now, but what we aspire to be. From there, from that vision, then take a look at these goals. Are we still working on these goals? Do we need to amend them? Do we need to add to them? And from that point, come up with very specific strategies. So I'm recommending that we look at this from a three-part process: vision, goals, strategies. And at the center of our vision, of course, student achievement. Does anyone have any thoughts, or, I know you all had some homework. This is exciting.
Yeah,
I'm excited.
I have some thoughts. I looked at this, I read through all the information that Mike handed out, and I read through the presentation that Mike gave at the professional development session Tuesday, and Susan, your chart that I think you had in mind when you said student achievement.
Yeah, that was mine, yeah.
I personally like Mr. Brooks' vision that he documented here, and we can read it for the public if
Read
we
it.
want.
Please.
Mike had a header on this chart that said, "My overall vision of teaching and learning is to support a K through 12 structure with program options at all levels that have the pathways and supports which allow students to graduate with the most advanced degree possible, with a rich array of courses on their transcript, and the highest GPA/class rank attainable for each student." To me, that kind of says it all. And if you wanted a supporting picture, Susan, then the one you made there, and your, when I guess while you were speaking, kind of fits along with that.
I think the one thing to the vision that we need to add to that, because it's definitely down exactly where we've talked about in our goals, is at the end of that, not the beginning, at the end of that, what Mike has there, while still trying to maintain the lowest possible cost, efficiency, just to wrap, because it really is, our whole job is two-part. It's educating kids and doing it in the best, and I'm missing the word right now, the best,
Most cost-efficient manner.
cost-efficient manner. Fiscally responsible, that's it. In the most fiscally responsible manner possible, because that covers it all, because it's not always about lowest cost as it is being fiscally responsible, as we all should have been very happy with this week when you got your tax bills and they were lower. I hope everybody.
If your
Only if your
assessment-
appraisal didn't go up, Mike.
Mine wasn't
So
lower either.
would that be a part of the vision, or would that be a goal?
I think isn't that the big?
I
I don't know, maybe,
I think
you're better
for
at this
me,
stuff.
I mean,
I'm just thinking
for me,
I think that's the.
it should be a goal is to start figuring out where we are and being financially responsible.
I think he's right. Vision, goal would be more like the email I sent out, a specific, we'll
Yeah.
say target. But I think a general fiscal responsibility thing would be more of a vision than a specific goal.
But a vision
So-
is something that, to me, it would be a goal to get us
That's
there.
the next step, though.
Yeah, but the
Yeah, the
vision is
goal
definitely,
is-
right, and you guys use the word strategic. I'm not sure if that's the same that I think as tactical, but at some point, you gotta build tactical plans with the appropriate measurements and results and continuous improvement plans to get to those goals, which supports the vision. But however words you wanna use is semantics, but I like it, and I like the idea of adding a financial statement of some sort, because it really is all-inclusive, no matter what we do.
So when
And-
I think, I'm sorry.
That's it.
When I think of vision, I think of creating a school district that's highly regarded for its academic excellence and improving the community in which it operates. Because ultimately, and I'm not saying that can't be a part of it, I'm thinking like from a much broader perspective,
You just
that,
went up 10,000 feet, yeah. No, seriously, I see what you're saying, you just went
Yeah.
up.
yeah.
If you go up one, then this becomes a goal.
Yeah. Because I'm thinking about the bigger picture. The bigger picture is if we are regarded as a school district of academic excellence, what does that mean? That means when families are looking to move, to build, that rooftops are going to be filled, and because let's face it, for families, that's probably the number one thing that they look for, the school district. So, and then just ultimately, that improves the community in which the district operates. So when I'm thinking vision, I'm thinking that big. And then what you're saying, and John, what you're saying to me is more goals. And then why don't you talk about what you had?
So what I had in mind is the board's already received an email on it. You guys didn't purposely, because I like to hit you hard at the meetings. That's what I do. I'm cheap. Everybody knows it. I would like to see a specific goal. Pat, I know when you build a budget, you build a certain percentage into that budget as a buffer. I would like to set a specific goal to go above and beyond that, be a percentage, a dollar amount, whatever we can come up with collectively.
In terms of, so you want more of a buffer?
I want more money. Well, I shouldn't say it like that. I want more savings. So the specific goal I'm thinking of is above and beyond, I think you say 4% you build into it,
We build in 4% worth of contingency.
contingency money. So,
That's not, but that's not the whole, but
right, but above and beyond the 4% you normally build in, I would like to see that money, I'll just shoot a number, say, raise it 0.5%, whatever it is. I want that 0.5% to pay down debt. It's not necessarily I'm looking for money to hide, put in an account. I want it to pay down debt. The reality is we have a lot of debt. People want their tax bills to go down, and the only way we're going to get there is to get rid of that debt.
The tax bills went down this year.
Mine
no, I
didn't.
didn't.
Yeah, but you can't pay down debt ahead.
Right.
Is there a penalty to paying it down?
Most likely, we'd have to look at our individual debt schedules. I mean, you know, in where we are now, in the, you know, in the, let's see what year, 2021 school year, we lose about $500,000 worth of debt payment a year. And then the following year, 21-22, we lose $1.2 million worth of debt payment every year. So in the very short future, relatively speaking, we're going to see a reduction in debt. The $500,000 reduction is going to have a correlating reduction in state aid payment for building aid because we're going to lose that. But the following year, the $1.2 million is a tax cert. We don't receive aid on that. So that's a true reduction in overall cost. But we are also in the discussions of, you know, I don't think it would be responsible to allow all of that debt to retire because we do have a building condition survey that identifies specific areas of need within the district. So rather than have to, you know, issue new debt above and beyond our existing debt, it would be a good plan to reduce or to replace some of this expiring debt with new debt because you could in effect reduce the taxpayer's bill while at the same time protecting the assets of the district.
So let's say we come up with another 200,000.
And well, I don't want to interrupt you, but there's one other part when we talk about in the next section, or new business, when we talk about funding the capital reserve, that is a specific function of preventing debt. So when we go to issue debt, there's always going to be what's considered a local share, right? We'll receive aid on a specific portion of the debt. We're essentially taking that extra money that we have, putting it into a reserve so that we can use that to offset any new debt that would be acquired.
Right.
So it's kind of a roundabout way, but it's in a net effect having the same effect as prepaying debt, because we're
Right.
saving money to
What
avoid
I'm asking for
issuing
is
debt.
actually additional savings, be it transportation. I really, be honest with you, I don't care where it comes from. Additional savings. Can we take that additional savings and put it towards, let's say, when the tax bill comes out, and we're going to take $2 million out of fund balance. If we came up with 200,000, can we do 2.2 million? Anything to offset a tax bill.
Well, see, part of the issue you have here is you don't hit the levy until you expend next year. We have to get through $3.6 million of reserves and appropriated fund balance before you get to the levy. So all you would do is if you, it would not be wise. So, all right, we'll go to a philosophical. It's a little, it opens up a whole door to a bigger discussion. The levy is capped by the state. So it is unwise, it would not be my recommendation that we go anywhere under what the tax cap allows us to go to.
I'm simply saying.
That's the levy, though.
Right.
So there's really no way, I would not recommend you reduce the levy.
I'm asking you to not reduce the levy, to return the money back to the taxpayer.
Right, so.
But we do that.
For us to do that, we need to cut back on what we're spending also.
We do that every year. This year, we're giving back $3.6 million because we're appropriating reserves and fund balance to the operation of our district. That's money that we have that we're essentially giving back to the taxpayer because we're using that money to fund district operations rather than using taxpayer money to fund district operations.
To me, it's all kind of a play on words. Let's say this year you found another 200,000. You put it into the fund balance, then you take it back out. You're not dropping the levy.
So,
It would never be my recommendation that you reduce the levy.
right, so that's what I'm saying. Can we find another?
But unless you
Whatever.
reduce the levy, you have no impact on the tax bill.
so for me, James, my thing would be, instead of coming up, last year our budget was $56 million. I don't want to go beyond $56 million. So I would like to find ways to cut back on our spending here in
So
the district
the-
and not to go over the 56
The
million.
one thing you have to remember is, just a short number of years ago, you cut back dramatically in the district, cut back so far that we had to very slowly bring back certain aspects that were cut, some of them just for operational purposes. So I understand what you're saying, but there's contractual obligations that are going to push you above that.
And I get that, Patrick. But also, when we did that, we also, this has been a large budget. Every year it's gone up. We lost $17 million, and the taxpayers are paying for it now. Now it's time to tighten our belts again.
The
and say,
taxpayers don't pay anything more than what the levy is. And the levy, I would always
I
recommend.
have to
If I
tell
can
you-
just rein us back in, we started with vision. This is really good discussion that has to happen. Perhaps this specific discussion can be in the Finance Committee meeting working towards our goal. You're not in there now?
I think I
I'm
am,
not
but
there either.
Well, and I think
And
this
that's,
goes with
you
the
know.
other option on the news business.
Are you in?
We haven't had a finance committee meeting yet, and I really think before we bring that whole thing, we should have a finance committee meeting.
Yeah.
Well,
So
the
we
only
kinda-
issue is we
But that
really
means
need to get a number so we can
really
close the
important
books for the 16-17 school year. And since we have Rosh Hashanah for what would have been our next meeting, and we're pushed off to the end of the month, we've come with a recommendation when we get to it on what the dollar value is, and we can talk about that. But I'd really, even if you don't authorize it today, I'd like to have a commitment that that's what's going to be authorized at the next meeting so that we can finish closing out the books.
Okay, so
was just going to say, Sue, in support of what you were just saying, to bring us back, some set of financial targets, however we would figure it out, we're in the weeds now on the how, but it should be one of our goals. That's really what James is saying.
Yes.
Whether it's whatever the percentage is or how we do it by taking from the fund balance or adding something, however that is, that's all detail that we would need Pat's full presentation and details to get around to understand the how. But I think the bottom line is, yes, I think we all agree we should have a goal, I think, or at least I'm in agreement with Jim, let's just go there, that we should have some kind of a goal that says, can we get more money back to the taxpayers, even while because we spent the last 2 years adding some program back, we've increased our budget a lot compared to the couple of years below, behind it. And I think we just need to look at that. How?
You have
I
to
don't
also
know.
understand that you're $1 million artificially high this year, because you had $1 million in revenue with the Smarter Schools Bond Act, and we had $1 million worth of expenses to offset that. So automatically next year, your expenses, if you were to hold everything constant and say, we'll just move to next year, you're gonna see $1 million reduction, because we're not gonna have the
You're
Smarter
assuming the
Schools Bond Act.
state's actually gonna approve it before next year?
Correct.
Well, right, or we don't get it this year and we don't spend it this year, like we didn't get it
Just
last year and we
if I
didn't
could
spend it
help
last
the
year.
board understand and have a level of comfort, if you remember, one of the items that I put on the themes is in the December timeframe budget parameters. That certainly begins our discussion on how we're going to form a budget. As we're proceeding through the budget process, we are completely transparent in the process of how we allocate the funds that we're anticipating that are going to come in through state aid, through other accounts, other revenues, and through our levy. So in that process, all of you, not just the Finance Committee, I agree that the Finance Committee should probably take this up to help format a goal from that group, but all of you will be fully involved in that process, just like we have for the last couple of years in my presence. So there's not one opportunity, there's many opportunities to swing at this pitch. So
basically.
for us, administratively, the most important part of that is that December meeting. Because if there are targets that we need to set as far as what the full board expects of us, we need to begin that process in December so that when we're ready to present the superintendent's recommended budget, I'm where you are as a full board.
And that's why the vision is so important, because if we start with the vision, we just started with vision and we went to December. So we need to get back, we need to look at, everyone needs to consider, what are the core values, your belief system that is going to drive the vision, and from there, every other thing has to fall in line with the vision. So think about, defining the vision basically means taking charge of our destiny. What are we going to what do we want to look like from the big picture? Think big. So unless anyone has a specific statement right now that they would like to propose, I think we probably need to move on. But in regards to the vision, if you're thinking bigger, and then we go to the goals, and then we go to specific strategies, which include us being data savvy, budgeting, all of these other things. So, everyone good with?
I think you gave the foundation of it. I think if we circulate that, start talking about that, I think that really gives us that 50,000 foot rather than where we were at. I think you really brought us up there.
Okay. Let's see, what else do we have?
So we can type some of that up tomorrow.
Sure. Sounds good. Yes. Okay. I think that concludes our old business. Did I miss anything on that list?
Hey, just one thing I want to add before you leave that topic is I think we should think about the approach we do in between meetings. So I like to propose do a couple of things. One is I like your vision statement, and start with that, and we can play with words and adjust it accordingly.
Okay, so I'll send it out on an email.
Yep, and if anybody wants to add to that, we can, or,
Our business needs to be in public at public meetings, though.
yeah, but prepping, I mean, you can't,
You really should have that deliberation and talk here. I mean, we can create that document by, if you send the stuff to Teresa, we can compile it all.
I know where you're going, John. Unfortunately, we can't do wholesale exchange of emails between meetings.
It's considered
Okay.
conducting
It's
business.
can you do, you can't do a work, all I'm trying to think of is, I'm not one to do writing paragraphs by consensus.
Well, I was just suggesting that, I mean, to create a school district that is highly regarded for its academic excellence and for improving the community in which it operates. Do you need to write that down?
We'll take care of
Okay.
it. If you send us verbiage that you want included
Okay.
for next week's discussion,
Okay,
which was the purpose of this, was to start, be a prompter.
okay. So what I was,
What we want to make sure we avoid is having deliberations via email on what goals will be. So
Okay.
if you send it, your ideas to Teresa, we'll compile it for the board's consideration at the next meeting.
okay.
Sounds
That-
good.
That's really where I was heading in terms of trying to define a process. So clearly mine wasn't legal, so we'll go with yours. So we'll go with yours. And so a couple of parts to it. We'll start with Sue's vision, we'll write it down. We can all propose changes. I'll throw out that I want to put his vision from the presentation as one of the main goals. And I also went through each of these 5 of last year's goals and kind of thought to myself, well, maybe we don't need one that says update Board of Education policies if we've done all that work already, right?
It'll be done soon.
Right. And there's a couple of others like that as far as, I think, maybe not a couple
But that
others.
may
But
be a
that's always a
goal.
work.
That's a
then-
goal I think that's a goal that'll always be, because it really is a work in progress. We may have to refine the way it says, John. It may say, maintain your policies to be in compliance with
Yeah.
current law, et cetera, et cetera. It should, because policies is one of our main tasks.
Okay,
So I
fair
think it should
enough.
always be a goal. It just gotta be refined from being, we
Right.
did this major undertaking. When we talk long-term,
Yeah,
you know,
okay.
we gotta, the short term is maintain them, and our 10-year plan type thing is to do a wholesale review every 10 years.
Okay.
You try and maintain them, but you do a
Yeah.
microscopic 10-year review because you miss stuff.
All right, fair enough. So I guess I'm trying to give us all more homework. To say, take these 5, reword them, add them, add some new ones, modify 'em, whatever, so we can come up with a compiled list to look at next time. Because that's how I kind of took my own approach to it. I didn't rewrite them yet. I had questions on some of these, whether we needed them anymore, but we don't probably need to do that tonight. Then at least we have something to look at. Since we can't really do a work session and write these things separately, then let's all do it individually, compile it somewhere. I guess Teresa's going to be the collection point and have something for the next meeting. Would everybody kind of go for that as an approach?
We are going to have a workshop meeting on the 5th of October.
Perfect. Maybe that's the meeting we should do that, but
Yeah, I don't think.
It's the
if I
approach I'm at,
remem-
not
if
the-
I remember correctly, I don't think there's anything wrong with, if you have a concern, or you have an idea, or you have a suggestion, that you share it to everybody, because it all gets everybody thinking about it.
yeah.
You'll just notice most people didn't respond to them,
Right.
because we can't. It's good to take it in and start thinking the process, but then we need to come here and have the dialogue about it.
Right, actually, that's a great point. The preference would be if anyone sends anything to Teresa, me, or Susan, it should be to all of us.
Yep.
It's just the back and forth shouldn't happen.
Okay.
That's the only thing.
And the reason why I bring it up is one of the things I have on my mind for goals is to create a set of measurements and reports that's consistent with showing the performance of our district in the 3 A's, academics, arts, and athletics. And it ties to the presentations coming up at the showcases. So maybe we can, I'll start getting that down on paper and ahead of the game, so we can, maybe it can affect the content of those presentations.
Just send it to us and we'll
Okay.
add it to a discussion document.
Got it.
Anyone else on old business?
Oh, and I know it's been crazy at the beginning of the year, Mike, But I noticed at the football game the other day, you still had Bill listed.
Yes.
And he's on the website too. so-
Yeah, the memo's going out probably tomorrow, making sure everybody updates all of their programs and all that stuff, so yes, yeah, and we do have to update the website too, Mike, if you could take
And
a
I
look at
have-
that. Bill's name on the website. Go, Bill.
I have one more too, and actually this was one of Russell's, was the orange, the Duke's flag in the front of a high school. Are we getting a new one? It's still faded?
I thought that
It's
that
still,
was
I
taken
thought
care
that
of.
was supposed to be replaced?
I don't know that off the top of my head. I'll find out and get
Because I know
an email out
Russell
to you.
asked for that last year and they were getting a new one and.
Yeah, I know
Yeah,
that,
it's- We're starting the school year, let's put our colors up and make them bright and shiny.
Which one are we talking about here? 'Cause
Right at the front of the high school, the
the
Duke's.
American flag.
No, the
Oh,
Duke's flag.
Duke's flag, the orange.
Our orange and black flag, it's all faded.
on the small
Larry was supposed to get a new flag.
I thought that he took
And
care of it.
Russell brought
We
it
might-
up last year.
No, I
so-
thought it
we'll
was
know
taken
by,
care of.
we'll know by exact.
Want to make sure that we're talking
know.
about the same orange, because I thought it was done.
Unless he's talking about the one that's by the football field. But this is right in front of the high school when you pull in.
Any other old business? Moving on to new business.
Yes.
Let
I
me-
do have a couple of quick things. The one Pat alluded to before, actually one thing, is the fund balance. So if the board so chooses, we would like to give you some information tonight. If you choose to act on it tonight, wonderful. If not, we would ask that you act on it next time. We do have a certain amount of reserve left over that we would like to see deposited into our capital reserve fund that was established a year and a half ago now by the public. Some of that discussion happened about 20 minutes ago, so, but maybe Pat, you can give the board a little brief on
Sure.
where you and our auditor are.
So we do have some preliminary numbers in terms of what our fund balance and reserves are for the end of the 16-17 school year. And in discussing with the auditor, it's his recommendation that we take some money and put it into the capital reserve that we had formed earlier. We finished a little bit better last year than we had anticipated, so we are in a position, and I looked at a 5-year projection, and it does appear that, you know, my recommendation would be that we put $500,000 into the capital reserve fund. Based on the current projections, we still will maintain our 4% fund balance, which is allowed by law through the 21-22 school year, which is as far as we projected out right now. Reserves and fund balance, right now we sit at about $7 million total between reserves and fund balance. By applying the $500,000, we do get to a point in the 2021 school year where we drop below $1 million worth of reserves. So we would have our 4%, about $2.3 million in fund balance, and we'd have about $900,000 in reserves. But as we said previously, the next year, the 21-22 school year, is the year where we drop that $1.2 million in outstanding debt payment. And that then gives us the opportunity to start building those reserves back up a bit. So right now, the projection is with all of that debt retiring, which is not going to be the recommendation, that, you know, we go from $900,000 in reserves to the following year about just a little bit over $2 million worth of reserves. So, you know, we're still obviously feeling the effects of the loss of the Dynegy property and the change in the district valuation. But as has been our plan the entire time, we were able to build enough cash in our cash position to get us through the period of time now that the emergency aid has expired, and we do feel comfortable moving forward that we would be able to put this money in a capital reserve fund. Now, the capital reserve fund, once it goes in there, the money is not available to us any longer until we utilize that money for a capital project. And again, that would require board authorization and voter authorization to spend that money out of the capital reserve. We did look at it, and if we put any more than that in there presently, I just don't feel comfortable with that reserve number out a couple of years. Realistically, every year we get to take a look at this. So if next year we look at it and the picture looks better in that year, we always have the opportunity, you know, the capital reserve exists for 10 years, so we have the chance to fund it over that 10-year period. So every year we'll be taking a look at what our projection looks like with our reserves and fund balance, and is there an opportunity to put money into that reserve, which is in effect returning money to the taxpayers, because when we do issue debt for projects, this money would be used to offset that amount of debt that would be issued.
And certainly over time, our goal would be to build that so that there's less and less of an impact if there's ever a project in the future, certainly focused around the building condition survey, it's less of an impact to the
Correct.
taxpayer. That's
It's like a
that
savings
long-term
account.
vision.
We're basically saving money to buy capital improvements in the future.
Can I make a motion to move $500,000 from fund balance to the capital reserve?
Second? James?
Yes.
Any discussion?
I'm just not comfortable because we haven't seen the projection or any of these numbers. And this is, I know you talked briefly, you thought there'd be some stuff coming. To be getting this at last minute to put $500,000 away without seeing the 5-year projection or seeing any of that, I'm just not comfortable with it.
And I don't have a problem, honestly, I don't have a problem if we don't authorize it today, but I'm looking for a commitment on the number so we can start closing the books. We could have discussions, you know, and we could hold off and I could show you the documentation.
We can
for the
include
next meeting.
documentation in our update for the next meeting.
I don't understand, what's the difference between a commitment to move it versus a vote? Isn't it, we're going to...
Well, if I get a commitment that we're comfortable with this number, you don't have to take action until you can review the documentation and see what the projections look like.
But how
it's
can we
gonna-
do that until we see the numbers, Pat?
No, we don't need
I'm not
commitment.
asking-
No, we're gonna, what he's asking for, let's keep this on the rails. What he's asking for is a commitment that at the next meeting, we'll vote on this. Between now and the next meeting, we'll create an agenda item and we'll provide documentation for you to study so you're prepared for that vote.
Correct,
Oh,
and
is
the
that what you said?
recommendation would be for $500,000, and we'll provide the documentation
Right.
for that.
So really, this is just planting a seed tonight.
Absolutely.
Certainly, if the board chose, we could move forward, but it's smart. Let's take our time, let's give you the financial projection that Pat and I have reviewed and our auditor has reviewed, so that you folks can make an informed decision, and that's perfectly fine.
And when you say financial projections, you mean the numbers that Pat just talked about as far as...
Correct.
Okay. I was just going to say, I agree with yeah, Frank. And two parts of that, you round off a lot of numbers there. I'd like to see what that on a chart or something so I can absorb it. And then also the outcome of the building condition committee, and what type of things you see coming forward. Like I keep hearing
We're
about
not,
the football
yeah,
field. for
we're
example.
not prepared to present on that yet. That's
Nothing,
gonna be-
not even
that's a-
any suggested things in
Well,
any
we
of
have the
future-
building condition survey, we could share that with you, which identifies the areas that need to be.
Okay, you just don't have any estimates?
We don't have a financial plan or
Okay.
an actual
Fair enough.
schedule of what,
Pat?
we're working on that.
Pat, maybe the board would also request of Pat to make sure that the building conditions, the facilities committee, meet before a certain date to begin that process. And Pat can organize that with the facilities committee. So when would the board like to see the facilities committee begin that process of reviewing, you know, by the mid-November, let's say by the second meeting of November, have that work session focused on a report of the facilities committee to the full board on where the BCS is. I mean, that's a workshop meeting, so that might be well-timed. And maybe the facilities committee can meet 1 or 2 times to review the condition survey and prioritize. Does that?
By the next meeting?
No, by the by November 16th. So the November 16th meeting could be focused on a full report to the Board of Education on the building condition survey.
But you need a vote next meeting.
No,
But
No, we
two
need
different things.
we
John,
need to vote
building
on the
condition
money.
survey
Yeah.
and the $500,000 recommendation are two completely separate things right now that will converge at some point in time if the board chooses to address those projects that are related to the building
Yeah, and
conditions.
probably not, John, just when you think about these two things, not even in this fiscal year.
Right.
The building conditions things is a planning, looking at, it's not something like, oh, we've got this money, because if that were the case, we wouldn't put it into that. If we were
No,
looking to do something immediately, we wouldn't put it into that reserve.
Yeah, I was just thinking if we had a view of the building's condition and some kind of summary in preparation of seeing the financial
Preparation
data.
we're looking at is like the 2021 and 21-22 school years when that debt's gonna retire.
Okay.
If I could just help,
Fair
for
enough.
efficiency purpose, just so that we get perspective here, because we're starting to get ourselves into weeds in a number of different areas. And quite honestly, if we start getting ourselves from a policy perspective into weeds, we're really going to start tying the hands of the people that are on the ground doing the work every single day. That's where this group can help us administratively target in on what do you want us to end with? And maybe that's back to what Susan's perspective is. What is our vision for this district 5, 10, 15 years out? What's the big picture? This year, what do you, under that vision, where do you want us to end up in any number of areas? Whether it's the fiscal side, whether it's the academic side, whether it's the emotional side, whatever the side is, where do you want us to end up there? There certainly are some board committees that are existing right now that can break out from this forum and study some very particular areas. But we can have 3-hour meetings every single meeting if we get into the details of each of these elements at these meetings and not really carry on the business of the school district.
Yeah,
That's not, we're not productive if we're gonna have 3-hour meetings on this stuff.
No, I agree with you, Mike, but I'm not sure this is too much in the weeds. If a board is being asked to move $500K into this reserve fund,
Right.
I think Frank brought it up, and I agree. It would be fair to say, do we have any kind of outlook on how much money we're going to need in the next 1, 2, 5, 10 years? And how does that $500K impact the 1, 2, and 3-year financial position that we're all
Right.
going to vote on in the
Which is
budget
the
process, right?
documentation we're gonna provide.
Okay, that's
so
fair.
that you can study that.
Right.
And maybe an assumption on my part, if Pat and I are gonna be recommending to put $500,000 into an account, my bad assumption on that, there will be the need for us to take that money out at some point in time because we've seen the BCS.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
But
you know, I mean-
I think the part, and it's not a bad assumption at all or anything against what you and Pat are recommending. I think we have these committees that we should be utilizing so that a portion of the board is prepared to support the core decisions that we're supposed to make. So it's not just coming from the administration, that we've looked at it ahead of time, whereas had we met in August and talked about these, we'd have been prepared to support that here.
Yep.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. I know it's been a crazy.
No, it's good.
It's a crazy.
Right, so I
It's a
interpret.
very good, it's a very good perspective. So there is good process to that.
And I interpreted when you mentioned the committee that we could potentially go have the committee meeting, see that report, and have that perspective, or at least a very high level of view of that perspective before you did the financial review, and be able to share that. That's what I was going at. I
The
wasn't trying
timing
to.
was tough with the time we got the information from the auditor and the time we had the
Yes.
meeting and getting it all prepared and getting to the actual
Fair
determination.
enough, but I don't want to give the impression we're digging in the weeds for that. That's what
Right,
we
but
were
the building
thinking about.
condition survey is something that the facilities committee absolutely needs to dig deep in. Remember, that was something that was created by an outside engineer group that took them months to put together. So really, taking a look at that report is very, very important for us. Some of those items will need capital expenditure.
Yeah.
Some of those items won't.
Right.
They're short-term items that we can resolve pretty quickly and certainly have begun. So Larry and Pat will be able to report on that. It's a matter of now the school year started, we can start the process of getting groups together and board committees so that we can advise, decide, and move forward. That's really what it comes down to.
So we had a first and a second. I'll make the motion that we table.
I second it.
Good.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
Teresa, do we have, like the, after the reorg meeting, we used to get a list of all the committees and who was on them.
And it was on there.
We can send a list. Yep.
Yeah, if you
Can
could
you send
email
that out?
us.
Can you
Also
send that out
everyone's
tomorrow?
phone numbers,
Thank you.
and a sheet of paper with everyone's phone numbers, and so you had it. Thank you.
Any other new business?
Well, last night I did go to Orange Ulster School Board meetings. They are talking about the convention. I'm going to ask everyone to go online and look at the resolutions and let me know if there's any of them that you feel strongly or not strongly about, because when we go to vote, I'll know how to do that. The other thing is the Mid-Hudson School Council was there last night, and they presented. One of the things that she had said was that we take part of the survey for new teachers, Robin, that they called on us for new teachers survey for certifications and stuff, and that we happen to be one of the school districts that are actually involved with that. And I thought that was a very good thing, because it keeps track, and they're going to continue to do that. One of the other things was they have two, September 28th and October 25th, Risky Business Management. It's a dinner that I brought back. And the other one, which is the state trooper that did come, Craig, they came and talked to us. They were also doing dinner with him about drug awareness. So I brought these back for
He's
my...
terrific, too.
Yes.
He's been with our staff. He's scheduled again, I believe, with our staff at the schools and students. He's wonderful.
Well, the drug awareness also covers the social media piece, so I brought those back. And basically just going to convention, that's just a little touch of what we talked about last night. Thank you.
Any other new business?
In terms of the flag, I did text Larry, and he said that they just put that flag up not long ago, maybe a few months, in front of the high school, the MD flag.
Well, if it does, it looks, because when we were at the high school, it kind of looked faded already. All right, I'll relook at it. Thank you.
Yep.
Any other items?
It's just not bright orange anymore.
At this time, district residents. At this time, we'd like to recognize any district residents. If anyone has any concerns, please approach the podium. Yes, we need you to come to the podium, Mr. Walters.
First thing is that I missed the last meeting because I was out of town. I don't think it's on. It's on. But something that bothered me from the first time we met in this room, why 3 board members were relegated to what I called the children's table. They were not sitting up with the rest of the board. I am glad to see that those 3 people are now sitting with the rest of the board. Right? I don't know when that change happened, but I'm glad that it happened.
Happened last meeting.
My
I said
next
it
part
happened
of the
last
question
meeting.
is that when and if you ever appoint the 7th person, can you fit another chair up there so that all 7, so that means the superintendent will have to go to the children's table. Right? And my last comment is, several years ago, when meetings were held at the Marlboro Elementary School, and possibly it might have been the year that Russell and Bill Bell got on the board, there was a lot of people who came to the meetings and questioned why, when the votes were taken, they were taken like you did tonight. Then it was changed that they were all done by roll call votes. Why have you gone away from roll call votes?
I did both tonight.
You only did the roll call on 1 vote.
Correct.
The rest of them were all yeses, anybody no. why can't we have roll call on every vote? It can't take more than an extra second. Since it was
Well,
a policy that was set up
it's-
and changed
It's
about
optional.
5 or 6 or 7 years ago by the people.
Well, that was way before my time,
Yeah.
but it is optional.
I would like to see you go back to that optional method of roll call votes. So that means we know how each one of you voted.
Well, you would know how each one of us voted because we all said yes, or someone said no.
You're not really giving each person the right to do the yes vote. You're saying all in favor. How do we know all of you said yes on any of those votes?
Because we also have the option after the yes to say no.
All right, but nobody spoke up, but how do we know that you actually voted yes each of the times?
I can assure you that I voted yes, and if I had a no, you would hear it loud and clear.
And the upside will be with board docs, we'll all be electronically voting also, in addition to stating what we're
But
saying.
it still should be a voice vote at the open meeting. I don't care what you do on the computer and private,
Well, it is a
whatever.
voice vote.
Huh?
It's a voice vote.
So you haven't answered the question. When did it change from,
I actually changed it myself last meeting. The first meeting that I was appointed president, we did it the old way. It was a very lengthy meeting. We felt that we were taking care of the business that needed to be taken care of, but that we were getting to discussion, which a lot of times when so much time is taken up in the roll call, by the time we get to the discussion piece of it, a lot of it gets lost because it's late. And quite frankly, I feel that the discussion that we've had tonight has been the most fruitful that we've had in a while, so I'm very pleased with it.
so you're saying you're not going back to the old style of voting?
Well, like I said tonight, I actually did both.
Yeah,
So when
you did the one once.
I did both because I felt there was reason for it.
Okay.
Thank
But-
you. Any other district residents? Oh, yes. Mr. Reynolds would like to take a picture of the board and the administrators. If we are all in favor, say aye.
Aye. Mark, can we do it against either that wall or the side wall? Because not for nothing, this thing in your photos really becomes an eyesore. The court.
Yes. Okay, so if there are no other district residents that would like to approach the podium, we'll move on to executive session. We have an executive session scheduled for proposed or pending or current litigation, collective bargaining negotiations. Can I get a motion to enter into executive session? Frank, second. James, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? I don't believe there is any action afterwards.